Welcome back, everyone. Carl Rosen here, Oculoplastics, Neuro-Ophthalmology, Anchorage, Alaska, Einstein's Eyes, our YouTube channel. John and I have created and built this, and I'm, like I said, Anchorage, Alaska, far from home, far from Einstein and New York City, but John is not. John?
Hi, everyone. So Carl and I trained at Albert Einstein. That's where we did our ophthalmology residency. And then he left at Oculoplastics, and now he's the leading or only oculoplastic orbit specialist in Anchorage. I'm a general ophthalmologist who specializes in cornea. I'm only about 20 minutes out of the city, so I'm not far from Einstein. I'm in northern New Jersey, and I'm very excited for our talk tonight.
Right. So it's easy to be the leading one if you're the only one. So it's fortunate to have worked that way. So today we have Diana Rheault, who's a guest of ours. We're eager to hear her. She is a founder of a boutique consulting company, Trifocal Advisors. We met through a HIT lab, Columbia Business School's digital connecting platform. It continues to run. Stan Kachnowski is a friend of mine that I used when I was CEO of Call Doctor. But Diana's going to talk about Trifocal Advisor and what her company does, and we're looking to kick it off. So Diane, it's all yours.
So I have one small correction because I wouldn't be, I must say this, which is my last name is pronounced Rheault, just like R-W, even though you would never know that from the way that it's spelled. So for those of you listening, it's Rheault, which is French, and nobody ever gets my last name right. So, so why start now?
It's good that we were consistent.
Exactly. But actually, I went to France thinking, oh, they'll get my name pronounced correctly. They butchered it too, and I was like, okay, you know what? I give up. So anyway, but yeah, so hi, my name is Diana Rheault, and as Carl mentioned, I am the founder of a boutique consulting company called the Trifocal Advisor. And sometimes I think people look at the name, especially because I did one project for Alcon, and there was an irony there because the name of my company is called Trifocal, so it was a little bit funny, but so my whole idea around the name for the Trifocal Advisor was just really that you should look at every business problem or anything from multiple lenses. You should not just kind of look straight ahead, right? And for me, bifocal wasn't enough. Trifocal, I was like, is there even such a thing as trifocal? And I found out that there was. So so that's kind of how that's how my name came together. And so there was a little method to my madness. And so, yeah, I mean, just talking a little bit about kind of, my trajectory, I guess, if you want to put it, is that I spent several years. First of all, I've always been interested in the healthcare space. My mom is a nurse, a retired nurse. She was in public health for many years. She taught at BC and at the School of Nursing, I think, there. And so healthcare has always been part of my life. And we grew up talking about our bodily functions like it was like the sky was blue. And then when I went to college, I realized, wow, not everybody talks about their bodily functions the way my family does. So I had to kind of rein that in. But a conversation with my mother is usually quite hilarious because we're talking about all these different things, in our bodies. But anyway, so I've always had an interest in health. I've always been exposed to it. But I ended up going into consulting at Rheault Consulting. I spent several years there within their strategy and operations practice, specifically around the payer and life sciences space. And then I left and I went to Pfizer and worked obviously in the pharmaceutical industry. And that's kind of where I basically continued on in that realm. And I'm just I think health is just so important. And if I think about like what feels right to me, operating in that space is kind of the thing that just feels right to me because it's all about making people better or preventing things from happening for people, and it's all about wellness ultimately, or disease reduction or elimination and all of that. So so I've always been kind of drawn to that space, and it just feels like, it's not to say I would never operate out in a different industry, but it's just the one that kind of resonates the most for me. So yeah, so basically, I was at Pfizer for several years, and I worked in many different areas at Pfizer, but I would say that in my last 2 years, I was in the vaccine space, and I specifically worked on the US and global launches for Trumemba, which is a meningitis B vaccine. And at the end of that long slog of 2 years of working on launches, which can be very time intensive and things like that, I sort of left there thinking, who's aware that I have vaccine experience? And I sort of chuckled to myself or whatever. And then a couple of years later, COVID happened, and a lot of people seemed to care that I had vaccine experience. So it was sort of helpful. But so sometimes I think when you think something that is a thorn in your side can actually become kind of a nice path forward that you don't always expect. So I'll stop there for a second and see if you guys,
I have a few questions. I mean, number one, when you were at Pfizer, where were you working? Which location?
I was at headquarters, 235 East 42nd Street. But we did when I first joined in 2010, we had just done an acquisition of Wyeth, which was out in Collegeville, Pennsylvania. So I did a lot of working with.
I'm just curious because we have one 10 minutes from my house in Pearl River.
Pearl River is more of an R&D area, I think. But the commercial is more in Manhattan, and they've just now moved to a very fancy, nice building. But we were in the other building that wasn't so fancy.
Then I definitely like your name. I mean, it's perfect to go on Einstein Eyes as Trifocal, so that worked out.
I know. I was chuckling about that. I hadn't even thought about that initially.
Right. You got near, intermediate, and distance. But Diane, so can you just give us an overview of how you came to found Trifocal Advisor, and then what specific healthcare related challenges does Trifocal Advisor address?
Yes. So I founded the Trifocal Advisor, and to anybody who has ever been an entrepreneur or is considering being an entrepreneur, sometimes people make it seem like, they always knew they wanted to be, or they woke up one day and they just did it. I would like to say that for me, it was an evolution. Because I was afraid to do it. I had a father and a brother who were both entrepreneurs, and I saw the peaks and valleys, and I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do that, So it took me a couple of years to get the courage, to be honest with you. But basically, when I was at Pfizer, it's a behemoth of a company, and I sometimes felt like, maybe I could have a more measurable impact in a smaller environment potentially. So I left corporate, and what happened was I was interviewing for or I should say, I was interviewing with a smaller biotech company, because I was thinking maybe I can make more of an impact in a smaller environment. And what happened was when they created a new role, and it was sort of like strategy and clinical operations. And I was interviewing for it, and it was a full-time role. And I said, I was trying to help them think about how they could use me or how they could view me. So unbeknownst to me, I said, well, think of me as an external consultant. And what I didn't know was that they had a business model long before I ever joined, was, in touch with them. They had a business model where they used about a third of their staff were independent contractors. And so when I was saying to them, think of me as an external consultant, suddenly when I got the job offer, it was not as a full-time employee, it was as an external consultant. And I was like, wait, how did that happen? But ironically, that set me on the path for what I actually really wanted to do, which was to have my own company. Even though I was afraid to do it and whatever, I was like, well, here's one step forward. So I did not, and that was like in 2017, 2018. I did not open the LLC until September of 2020. So from those two time periods, I was operating as an independent consultant, and I was, 1099 type of thing. But then, as I got more confidence, I basically was like, one day I was like, it's time. Like, I'm doing it, and so I opened the LLC, and I really haven't looked back since. But what I want to say to people, just again in the audience, or anybody who ever has any interest in being an entrepreneur, that it can also be like slow and steady wins the race. Like, you don't have to, I've talked to a lot of consultants, and what they did was they like went guns a-blazing. They got their website, and they opened all their, their LLC and all these things, and there were all these costs, and they didn't yet have the clients and all these different things. And so, I'm just of the opinion, like, one step at a time, like over, over a relatively short period of time. Then I was like, okay, it's time to buy business insurance. Then I would do that, and or time to open a business banking account, time to, so slowly. And last year I said, it's time to buy disability insurance. Do you know what I mean? So, but seriously, do you know what I mean? Like, you don't need to, go from 0 to 300, like in one day. You can slowly take, when it, sometimes you intuitively know, like, now is the time, right? But I talked to a lot of people, and they were like, oh, I wish I had not gone guns a-blazing, So I just want to encourage people to remember that slow and steady can win the race, and you don't have to do everything day one. You know what I mean? So Carl, to just answer to your question, basically the work that I do at the Trifocal Advisor is I focus on project execution, change management, and I've been working on kind of a new baby around emotional intelligence. And the basic idea is that the work that I've been fortunate to do over the past several years has really been about mission critical transformation initiatives. So something really big needs to happen, and how do we make it happen within the certain time frame? So, and again, I operate typically within the life sciences industry, but I have also done some work in the long-term care space, and some other sort of medical device and things of that sort. So, and it's all really about, my sort of 3 pillars of the project execution, change management, and emotional intelligence was because what I started to notice on these large scale projects was, number one, high stress. You got to get everything done yesterday. And what I noticed was, it wasn't so much that the companies didn't know how to execute on the transactional things, but what I noticed was there was always a lot of like people issues. And so I jokingly used to refer to myself as an undercover psychologist, because I was like watching this stuff play out, and I had the advantage of being that external person. So I wasn't like in it the way that the other people were. And I just thought, wow, like, it's really not so much about the actual work per se. It's about sort of how the work gets done by the people. So I then got certified in change management. And for anybody who, I feel like we throw out that term a lot, and I don't really think a lot of people actually know what it really is. And change management is really about the people side of change. So how do you initiate a change, and how do you help the staff adopt the change, and do the change, and continue to do the change, and want to do the change, right? And so as I got certified with that and did more around that, I started also noticing, gosh, it really feels like it's a lot about emotional intelligence. Like, I would just see in some of these high stress environments, people be yelling, like just inappropriate stuff. And I was like, there has got to be a better way here, And so for me, I kept noticing, I was like, you know what? It's really about the people. So I have kind of coined this, little thing where I say, so I lead with the people first mentality. And what I also would say is that, my little sort of three little slogans that I say is that projects don't complete themselves, people complete them. Organizations don't change, people change. And emotions don't regulate themselves, people regulate them. They bring them into the office whether you want them to or not. So at the end of the day, there's only one theme here in those three sentences, right? And it's about people. So, and I also feel that a lot of people don't even know really what emotional intelligence is. So I'm happy to just, kind of give a little definition. And I'm also certified in emotional intelligence. And so it's really a set of emotional and social skills. It's really about like how you perceive yourself, how you express yourself, how you develop and maintain social relationships, how you cope with challenge and stress, which we all know there's a lot of that to go around. And also how you use emotional information in an effective way and meaningful way in your life. So, and the other thing is my lens, here we go with my trifocal thing. My lens on this is that that if you want to be productive in, anywhere really, but I'm specifically talking about corporate America. But the beauty of emotional intelligence is it's a, double the benefit, right? Because it helps you at the office and it helps you at home, and so why wouldn't we want to be interested in that if it's like, kind of double duty there? But the point is that in today's world, the only thing that's constant is change. There's really nothing else, right? The only thing that's constant is change, right? So if change is always happening, markets, and competitive landscapes are constantly changing. Like you've got to get ahead of your competitor. And the way that, you need to be nimble and you need to be productive and you need to be efficient. And
Put a couple of things out. Kind of interesting as you're talking. Number one, I can definitely understand why they think you're a psychologist because you're definitely talking about that. I mean, that's what it is. It's how you're coping, how you're dealing with either work or personal relationships or everything. Have you heard of the book Who Moved My Cheese?
I have, and I'm pretty sure I read it, but a long time ago. So I'm a little weak on remembering.
Carl, do you know this book?
Yeah, John, I do.
Yeah. So it's a really quick read, but I mean, I just imagine almost like if you came into a company where there's going to be a change and the change is for the better, where you all understand you need to make this change. But like you said, the people need to handle that change. And it's like they need to thrive with it, not fight it.
Exactly.
That's really what the book is about. I mean, the book is a quick read. It's a few hours. It's almost like, and I've read that people have kind of said to people in their company, we want you to all read this book, then we're going to have a meeting because we need to change and we can't resist this change. It needs to happen. And the more you accept it and the more you thrive in it, the better we're all going to do. But you're bringing out that a lot of people, I mean, at least 1/3 of people will just put their head in the sand. Another third will kind of like accept it, but very, very, and then there's 1/3 that really thrive in it. They welcome it. It'd be great if all the people really accept it and thrive. And that's what it sounds like you deal with.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's interesting is that here's the thing that I worry about, I think, the most is what I don't want people to do, particularly business leaders. I don't want them to listen to my little spiel and think, oh, that's like some therapy thing. Do you know what I mean? Like emotional intelligence, because what I'm trying to do is shift the paradigm so that it's not viewed that way. And that we understand that if you start with people first, since they're the ones doing everything, that's what makes the most sense. And what I mean by that is, let me give you a small example. I was at a client town hall, and I was listening in, and they had their CFO present, the financials, and which obviously are very important, right? So I'm not trying to say that that's not important, but they focus so much on that, and there was no second slide that said, here's all the amazing people that made these numbers happen, right? So it's really great to have like a pie chart and revenues and all this kind of stuff. But if tomorrow I took away all your people, your numbers would be zero. So my point is that I think it's just that we're only now coming to this space where we're open to the idea even that, people have emotions, and I think for a long time, corporate America was like, you're not supposed to have emotions. So like leave them at the door, except for the fact that you can't cut people's heads off. Their brains are attached and they're going to bring their emotions into the office, whether you want them to or not. So to me, it's very obvious, but I recognize that you need to approach people with the right, terms and kind of help them shift how they're looking at it. But like we can't deny that if you were to take out all the employees tomorrow, like your numbers don't exist. So my whole thing is, if we agree on that, okay, just as like a basic thing, if we agree on that, then with artificial intelligence becoming more and more important, and how we recognize that probably some jobs are going to go away, maybe less people will be doing what they used to do, and so there are smaller maybe groups of people doing what used to be done by more people, right? So what does that mean? What that means is you have more collaboration, you have more people really needing to work. You have, let's just say, less people doing maybe more work in some ways. But the point is that you need to ensure that collaboration is superior, that efficiency is superior, that productivity is superior. And the way that happens is you work with teams and figure out, how do we address conflict? How do we communicate with each other? How do we share information? And a lot of these things, it seems so simple, but it's not done. I've never been on a team where they have come and said to me, this is how we handle conflict. This is how we discuss our issues. This is how we share information. Like, I've never been, and I've worked on a lot of teams, and I've done a lot of, I was on the, emergency use authorization call with, one of our big, vaccine manufacturers. Like, I've been around in some of these big environment or stressful environments, and nobody's ever said, like, this is how we do things on our team. This is how we collaborate. This is how we whatever. And despite all that, people still get things done. So I'm not trying to suggest that, we don't know how to operate at all. We do, but there are some very interesting statistics, which let me see if I can pull up just real quickly. That I found some statistics that senior executives who lack self-awareness are 600% more likely to derail, which can cost companies a staggering $50 million per executive. And also, how many times in the last, let's say, 6 months, have you seen a major CEO fired? Quite a few, right? Let's also look at like Sam Altman. The first thing I said when that came out was, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in that boardroom when all that stuff was going down. But here's another tidbit. Employees who lack self-awareness bring down team performance. Empirical research has shown that the unaware reduce decision quality by an average of 36%. They hurt coordination by 46%, and increase conflict by 30%. In aggregate, companies with large numbers of unaware employees perform worse financially. One study with hundreds of publicly traded companies found that those with poor financial returns were 79% more likely to employ large numbers of unself-aware employees. So, you know, I'm not saying this is the Bible or like the God's, you know, truth, but I'm saying that there's something there, right? And anytime you read about these CEOs that kind of have imploded, you read about all of the stuff, like, you know, how they weren't collaborative, or how, you know, how they alienated people, blah, 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 blah. Like, you know, I could go on and on and on. And what does this come down to? It comes down to emotional intelligence. So all I'm suggesting, actually, because the work that I do, I mean, I do the emotional intelligence stuff is sort of twofold. There's one that's in support of a project. So let's say there's a big change going on, or we're trying to get project done, right? It's not to say that we just do like a 2-hour training and then we go like this, you know, and we say we're done. No, it's about regular infusion, you know, an hour here, like, hey guys, let's discuss how we're going to handle conflict moving forward, you know, and have the team come up with the way that we're going to address it. You know, here's how we handle when decisions need to be made. Here's how we escalate. Here's how we, you know, do these different things. Here's how we're going to share information. And then there's like periodic check-ins, like, hey, how are we doing? Like, are we doing well with how we're handling conflict on the team? You know, it's kind of like regular. So it's not us sitting all together like kumbaya therapy. That's not what it is. Although I'm not against therapy by any means. But I'm just saying, in this particular environment, that's not what I'm trying to do. And then separately, if people have interest, you know, working more specifically on emotional intelligence, but also in broader, you know, kind of performance in their lives, I do work with people one-on-one around that. But it's all about wellness in the end. And not wellness as in like eating a good diet. It's like wellness in a holistic way, like in your life, you know? So as I said, I kind of have two avenues with the emotional intelligence. It's, you know, stuff that's, you know, related to the project execution and the change management. And then there's, you know, some select coaching work that I do with folks who have an interest in it.
I think it would be very helpful. I don't know if you've ever done this kind of consultation, but like in our field, I imagine private equity. So I imagine a bunch of doctors that are doing their thing, either own their practice or they have a gig, you know, a steady gig, and their employees and the nurses and the PAs. And suddenly this company comes in, takes them over for good reason, you could argue, but they don't handle that adjustment very well. I mean, so I think it's a great example. I mean, I also imagine my own practice where I own my practice.
Yes.
So, well, we want to make a change. We either want to start earlier or go later or add more patients per hour or change a type of, and you almost always you get most of the people are just, well, no, we've always done it like this. Like, that's not a reason to continue to do it. Now, what's interesting is I'm imagining my partner who I joined 30 years ago, and he had been in practice many years. And I would say we should have these meetings with his staff to get their feedback. And he said, I've tried it, but whenever we do that, it ends up becoming what do they call it? A griping session. You know, all the things that are bad. So like, how do you avoid that when you do these things?
Well, I think, you know, it's hard to know what are some of the confounding things but I can answer you kind of in a high level, which is, first of all, and maybe you can tell just by the way that I talk, when I talk about emotional intelligence, I'm very anti, like, we're not all hugging each other and we're not all, you know, because I'm trying to just talk about this from a very like logical kind of way, and not in anything more than that, because I feel like corporate America can only handle so much. So let's do in small doses. But what I will say is in some of the work, because I've done some talks on emotional intelligence, and one of the things that I found is that creating, and you've heard this term, and I don't like this term, but psychological safety. I'm not a big fan of it because I feel like for me, I think psychological safety, and I think of domestic violence, and that's like such a much more completely different realm, right? But because I'm not a big fan of psychological safety, but it doesn't mean that it's not relevant, and that is that psychological safety is really about creating an environment where people feel like they can raise issues and give their opinion, do whatever they need to do in the course of their day, and they're not going to be punished or mistreated or anything because they simply raised an issue. So I would say, without knowing, your colleague that you mentioned who said like, oh, it turns into a griping session. Well, maybe it's because they never have an outlet to periodically give feedback, right? So the one time they're allowed to, you're gonna get their stuff that's been building on them, and now they're frustrated. So and they take this small little outlet that they have because they can't believe they have it because they don't usually. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's just, and that is emotional intelligence. It's understanding that people they need a safe environment. They need to be able to raise issues, so maybe it's as simple as giving people like an email box where they can give suggestions or frustrations, right? And you have your office manager, periodically read them. And then let's say at your staff meeting, hey guys, we have, here are the like 3 top things that kind of were recurring in the emails that we got from you guys. And here's how we're going to address them. And then people were like, they listened to us, like, wow, we had some input. So one thing I want to just also tell you guys about, so with the change management stuff, there is a framework called ADKAR, and it stands for, so it's ADKAR, and A stands for awareness. And that's like, so when you want to make a change, you want to generate awareness. You want to let people know, hey, we're making this change. And these are the reasons why. There's D for desire. So you want people to feel like they understand what's in it for them. Because if they understand what's in it for them, they might be more apt to buy into the change. The other thing is K for knowledge, which is that you need to make sure that they have training or whatever it is that supports them in being able to literally, intellectually do whatever it is that is required, right? And then A is ability, which is that once you give them the training, you need to make sure that they know what to then do so that they actually can do the new thing. And then lastly is resistance, which is about that you've created the awareness. Hopefully you have generated the buy-in, you've given them the training, you've showed them now what it is they have to do to, like, whether it's the new process or whatever it might be. And then you have to monitor for resistance. And not in a militant sort of way, but you want to reward the behavior, the good behavior, or the changed behavior, right? So there's incentives, and they don't have to be financial, though obviously that's never a bad thing, but like it doesn't always have to be that way. And a lot of people, they've done quite a few studies. I don't off the top of my hand have one handy, but they've done a lot of studies where it shows that people don't always choose the money. Sometimes they choose the thank you, and people don't thank anybody, and I will tell you something, I feel very strongly about this. If I, during the course of my day, if I come across, like a customer service representative, or really frankly, anybody who goes out of their way I stop them and I say, thank you so much. You were such a help. You were so great. And they're literally standing there using most of the time shocked out of their, and you can tell they're like, you know, and one, I get something out of it because, you know, I see how I'm impacting somebody positively. But two, it's like, what is it to us to thank people? Like, it's because we're not aware. It's not that we're jerks. It's we are in our little world, our muddled world. We're running around and we're not thinking about other people. So I'm just like, so, you know, there's this element, right, of just people being heard and people being thanked. And some of that stuff is like cheap. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
Like,
Diane,
thank you. Like, what does it cost? Nothing, you know,
yes.
a little bit of energy.
So Diane, so I do want to say thank you. So I hear you, I see you, and thanks for that. So we got to wrap this up, but and we got a dog that's barking there. John, is that your dog? That's the
the door because my cats, I didn't know what they would do.
John breeds Great Danes. I don't know if you knew that.
Now, if you really want to hear them, I'll let you hear them. I'm muting.
That's so
So,
funny.
but Diana, so just in order to wrap up the discussion, I mean, we've gotten a lot of personal insight about what Trifocal does and what you do and how you approach a client in the healthcare space. But just if you can quickly tell us what your future directions are, and yeah, we'd love to hear it before we stop the recording.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, you know, the future of my firm, it's, you know, I'm focused on growth. I'm focused on building visibility. And, you know, I have not really focused a tremendous amount of time and effort on LinkedIn, but I am you know, I'm sort of in the works of putting out a lot of content. That's really where I'm focusing a lot of efforts just to build the visibility. But I really sort of see myself continually being known as an expert kind of in the field of maximizing productivity and efficiency through emotional intelligence, because I really do believe that it is growing and is just such an important skill set that I think we need more of it in corporate America. So that's kind of where I'm really spending my time in the next couple of months.
Great, great. Well, that's great. So really interesting. This is a little different for us. We haven't talked about emotional intelligence per se. We did talk about physician burnout. We talked about some other interesting things, but it's great. So Diana, we'd love to have you back. Maybe you could even consider well-being as part of this. I know that you have a part of your consulting practice with your clients is the power of 3: emotional intelligence, project management, and change management. And we can delve into that when we have a little more time. But we appreciate you being here. And yeah, so please subscribe, folks. I hope you enjoyed the talk with Diana. I certainly did. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. It was really great talking to you guys and spending time with you today.
Thank you. It's very interesting.
Thanks.